Hallo, einen wunderschönen guten Abend zur ESC-Sprechstunde mit Dr. Eurovision. Heute am 22. April und im Gegensatz zu gestern funktioniert die Technik und ich hoffe, dass der Stream auch durchhält. Ich habe meinen Computer extra auf ein Kühlpad gestellt, damit das Ganze nicht ausartet. Ich werde jetzt einfach mal einschalten und euch ganz herzlich begrüßen. Schön, dass ihr da seid zu dieser speziellen Ausgabe. Hello to all the friends of Dr. Eurovision. Thank you for being with us tonight at our special consultation hour with our special guest from Rotterdam, Merve Karpov. And with all of you taking part in the live chat, you have the possibility to ask you questions in whatever language you speak, and we will discuss together. And I'm looking forward to your comments and your questions. Hello, Harry. Hello, Franz. Hello, Martin. Hello, Hans. Hello, Amy. Thank you for being with us. And thank you, dear Merve, for being with us.
Hi, hi everyone who's watching. I'm Merve. I live in Rotterdam, but I'm originally from Istanbul. I'm Turkish, and I'm here to discuss about Eurovision stages, the topic that I studied as a part of my master's thesis in Istanbul Technical University.
How come that you picked such a topic?
I was very interested in Eurovision, especially Startup's victory in 2003. There was a hype about it in Turkey. And I found it fascinating as a child how magical it was. It transformed very ordinary songs even to very good spectacles. And for me, at that point, it was magic. Later, I understood it was something called production quality, and I decided to uh, understand what is a Eurovision production. I also wanted to see how come the stage looks so different every year, which is not the case for other major events like this.
So I'm going to have a look in the chat. So everybody's saying good evening, Merve, and
Mhm.
yeah, good evening, Europe. Hello, Andreas. Nice to have you here. Hello, Tina. Hello, Hans. So feel free to ask your questions. Otherwise, I will do it. And so my first question is regarding the structure of your master's thesis.
Okay.
How did you work when you analyzed the different stages? I mean, it's 65 years now, 65 different stages.
Yes. So I'm going to show um, some graphics from my thesis to show you that. So first of all, I wanted to analyze how many countries joined, when did they join, when they won. And I made graphics about that later. I watched all the Eurovisions and I put them in a structure there is in products we have a understanding that every product will be shaped by market and technology and time. So whatever market demands, whatever technology makes capable, will be shaping the products that people buy. So what I did was, how do I unshare the screen? Okay, stop share. What I did was to make a analysis based on that. So I first of all watched all the Eurovisions and took some notes, and I talked to the designers themselves to understand what was their point. I talked to Florian Mieder, the Turkish designer and Irish designer, and by that I tried to understand the concepts. And I also did some research on the technical development over time, and it was the way that I could actually put everything in a perspective. Otherwise, it's a very broad, uh, uh, topic that is very hard to summarize.
Okay, I see. Um, Wait a second. Uh, Here we go again. So let's look at the questions now. Um, Martin would like to jump into the topic. Were the ESC stages which don't have any connection between the stage and the culture of the hosting countries?
Yes, there were plenty. Um, I and sometimes the national representation is what the hosting countries are going for, but sometimes they just want an easy stage maybe, or they just don't feel like it, and they do more plain staging. And sometimes there are some trends like futurism in 2000s and before 2000s that is globally more important than nations themselves, and it comes up as the main theme. And I also noticed the nations represent themselves if they win for the first time after a very long time, mostly, or if they feel neglected in the international media. And I think that the Eastern European countries were especially the case about this. They were trying to show something about themselves so much that they actually put literal representations. But countries like Germany and sometimes Netherlands, they would not feel the need to do so.
So the stage 2004 in Istanbul must be a pretty good example for that.
The stage in 2004 was inspired by Hagia Sophia. It was an architect. It is the key, one of the most important architectural heritage in Istanbul. So they based the stage on that, in the interiors to be specific. And they collected people under the same dome as in Hagia Sophia. So they really wanted to show something. Tur- I I would debate it's Turkish, but let's not debate that.
Hmm. Andreas is having a guess. He says that the stages of Dublin 71 and 81 and Bergen 86 had strong connections with the national culture. Do you agree?
Which years were they?
Dublin 71 and 81 and Bergen 86.
Well, Bergen 86 was just an ISIS stage. One of the ways to represent the culture is through the landscapes, and the Scandinavian countries refer to ice and snow several times. And Bergen in 1986, I think, is an amazing stage, especially for the time, and it is really very Norwegian. And in Iceland, yes, in Dublin, 19 for Ireland, in Dublin, 1971, and 1981 too. What they had was using cultural heritage objects and abstraction of things, the crafts they're very good at, and that they really did put in Dublin 1971. They had Irish glass culture, and in 1981 they had more of Celtic crafts inspiring the stages.
So Hans is saying, or referring to the stage in 1980 when there were tulips on the podium in The Hague. Is
Yes.
it so simple to do national representation?
It is. It is much like when you go to a touristic shop and you buy tulips or Amsterdam shoes. It is very easy to put something very small that is that much associated with your culture will be enough, I think. And also, they did that on 1958 too. In 1958 in Netherlands they had 1,001 actual tulips on the stage, and they did it again in 1980. This time they had more abstract. I'm going to share the screen again, so uh, you will see. So in 1958 they had live tulips, and in 1980 they had uh, these big tulip abstractions on the stage, and it works. It makes it Dutch.
So, wait a second. I'm just changing the capture. Where are you here? No, I'm going to back to this
What is
chat
your
now.
question?
Wait a second. So in the chat, we have Harry asking, when I think of the stage sets of the past years and consider what these stages have, whether these stages have any relation to the host country, um, I think of 1992 and the Viking ship from Malmö, uh, which is, I think, quite obvious
Like
reference.
we have saying, it's just poking your eye with it. We are Vikings. But I think it also we saw okay, in 1990s, the literal, almost sculpturesque stages were common. Like Italian one is also very interesting. They all have pyramids and also sorts of stuff on the stage. But in the recent years, especially with the screens coming and joining the props. Um, sorry, joining the props, what happens is we have more abstract stages. So in 2014, Copenhagen also referred to uh, the nautical background of the country. They were also Vikings, but they didn't put an actual Viking ship in the background. They had this the architect. It was an architect who designed the stage, and he had what inspired. He was inspired by uh, the place where they built ships and everything that was going on there, and he abstracted in a level that nobody actually sees the ship there, but it was the inspiration, and it's for me worked brilliantly too. And in Portugal recently they also referred to nautical, had a nautical theme, but it was also quite abstracted, so we see that they don't need to put actual Viking ships or actual tulips in the stage anymore, but they can still refer to them.
hmm Amy was also referring to the Portuguese stage that resembled a ship, but in a very abstract way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the chat, wait a second, Christoph is saying, can or asking, can you tell us how much money a national broadcaster can save when they don't use LED walls behind the stage like Portugal did in 2018? And what does it say about the stage if they don't?
Well, Portuguese stage is a very big heartbreak for me. I don't know how much money it saved. I don't know the numbers about it, but it was a pretty big debate. And I know my talk with Florian Mieder was for the Ukrainian stage before it. And what he said for Ukrainian stage was, even though there was a big screen, he had a lot more ideas, including virtual reality and a lot of other things that couldn't happen because of budget. So the budget is always an issue that we can't use everything that we are capable of as humans because of budget issues, obviously. But Let's Screen is not a big budget thing as it was like 10 years, 20 years ago. Because we see now, even in national finals, they're using a lot of LED screens. So I think it was, and the Portuguese producer also said this last year in the conference. It was a decision that they made to make it more humble rather than to cut off the budget. Uh, they literally in Portugal had less screens in their national final the same year. So it's not the budget for that decision. It was just another approach, I think.
Mm.
Uh, I mean, in 2010, I know that the Norwegian producer said we can't compete with the Russian stage of 2009, so we're not going to have LEDs. But it has been 10 years afterwards, and uh, LED screens are a lot cheaper now.
I see. But you were referring to Florian Wieder, who is the stage designer for Eurovision now for many, many years. Did you
Mhm.
have the chance to talk with stage designers from the 50s, from the 60s?
Well, I talked with the Irish designer. Wait a second. He worked for several Eurovisions. He worked for the 1981, 1988, and 1997 Eurovisions. I couldn't go back to 50s and 60s, but I went back to him. Um, so, is there any question specific about it? So, I mean, the old designers are just saying if we had the technology right now, of course, what we did would be different. So it's not like the old designers are old fashioned.
Okay, so Andreas is making you a compliment, such a lovely lady.
Thank you.
And he's a fan of the living room stage of 1962.
1962. Okay.
Um,
Where,
and
where was it? Sorry, it's a lot of stages, so I will check it.
well, no problem. You know the
Some
Eurovision.
fans are better at this.
uh,
1962 was an interesting stage, but my approach was on it was in it was in Luxembourg, and they tried some twinkling lights, and I found that fascinating about it because that technology, just having twinkling lights, was such a big deal, and it actually didn't work at some points because it was a difficult technology back then.
yeah, so talking about technologies, what by Eurovision is famous for introducing new technologies into onto large scale. So, what would you think are milestones in terms of stage design?
uh, well, I am going to show my screen again. A second. So I think that there is a black and white period, obviously, and then we have colors, and the color really impacts the staging because
At the
the
moment, we
moment
only have a black period. I don't know why. We cannot
oh,
see
sorry,
anything.
there's a why is there a black period?
Oh, wait
Stop
a
sharing.
second. Oh, this is we never
Okay,
know
fine.
what.
I will just tell. Is it working now
Uh,
without the screen with me?
well, yeah. Now we can see you. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to not show the images. So we have obviously black and white period, and it's a big deal to have color because I need to mention this. One of the motivations of Eurovision and what makes it so interesting is every act tries to be different. Every act tries to create a different world. Whether it's when you have just paintings in the background, or when you have all the magic stuff that we have right now. It doesn't matter. The versatility for every act is very important. And when we are past the black and white period, we see the staging uses a lot of hue changes to create that as much as possible. I find it important. And the other milestone for me is obviously screens, but these are the major milestones. There are also milestones like using microphones, wireless microphones instead of wired, to be able to do that. There are also other lighting techniques like projections, video walls before LED screen was a thing, LED floors, pyrotechnics themselves, holograms recently. But also one of the major, obviously, milestones is the playback, half playback. When you remove the orchestra, things change a lot because before they remove the orchestra, you see the designers play with where to place the orchestra. Sometimes they put it on the stage. They put it next to stage, like they play with this element all the time. But after a while, in what was it, in 1999, they don't have that element anymore. So we see that the interaction with the orchestra and the people that they act is changed to the interaction between the acts and the audience. So we see waving flags and chanting people instead of the orchestra. So that's a big change. That's a big issue to solve space wise for designers themselves.
I
Uh,
see. There are some comments on elements and questions what they might represent. So Martin thinks that the rings in the Lisbon stage 2018 were alluding to the armillary sphere, which is in the Portuguese flag. Um,
hmm,
so the rings that span from the stage to the audience.
hmm. Well,
So this was a stage from Florian Wieder. How did he explain how he works, how to make it a national thing, his stage
okay.
design?
When I interviewed him, he said the stage shouldn't be national. The acts on it might be national if necessary. But I think later he decided it is a good idea to have a story about the stage too. So the Portuguese stage, the Israel stage, and the Dutch stage this year this year or next year also has a national representation part. But for the Portuguese stage, I don't know about rings because I need to rely on Florian Wieder when he says I did a nautical theme and he didn't mention that he put the rings and the Portuguese flag in there. One of the hard parts of doing this research is actually trying to understand what the designers intend rather than commenting more and making up things. I'm not saying he is making up things. I'm saying it was very difficult for me to draw the line to be less speculative, more work with more proven ideas. For instance, the Dutch stages from 80s for me, from 70s and 80s for me reflect a very good um, they represent Dutch design, the modernity in the Dutch design very well, but I didn't include it as national representation too because I didn't have any proof about it. So there needs to be a when you talk about it academically, there needs to be a proof behind it.
Yeah, definitely. This is the biggest issue in scholarly works, that you have to
Mhm.
find the corresponding sources. So
Yes.
we have interesting remarks here about the Luxembourg stage. Martin is saying they had a wonderful stage back in '84 when they had these different objects moving in the background. But I guess that there you don't have any sources that explain what it was all
Well,
about.
actually, I watched the documentary. Uh, it's there is this guy, Roland de Groot. I mentioned the Dutch stages, and probably it's Groot, not Groot. So Roland de Groot designed the Dutch stages in that era, and when Luxembourg was hosting it, they asked him to design it too. And it was his method to use actual moving elements. He did it in other years too. Well, the other years, like 1980,
Hmm.
1979, 76. And in these pieces in the backdrop, I watched in a documentary, are actually held by people. There are people holding them during the shows and moving them around. It was fascinating for me. So it is really fascinating. It also shows like uh, it doesn't matter if you move if you don't have the screens, you still want to do something creative and something different for every act.
Definitely. So let's go back to the chat. Christoph was saying the great and biggest stage was definitely in Moscow 2009, but the best and most beautiful for him was 2014 in Copenhagen. Not only
I agree, 100%. I agree with him.
Okay, so Danmark's radio did a great job. And Martin asks if you also included the artwork in your analysis, for example, the clay pattern in Riga 2003.
I didn't. In Riga, okay, because again, I had to stay in a limited part. I wanted to use this as analyze this as a product designer, so I looked at the physical thing. And when you look at the artwork, it is an amazing different realm. Hopefully, I will study that one day too. But it is amazing, and it is limitless, I think, because everything is associated with something when you look at the visuals. So in Riga, I think the stage itself was mostly about the landscape. So it still had national representation, but I didn't check the artwork for it.
I see. So, Harry is asking a question. Does it annoy you, or does it even happen that an artist's performance doesn't harmonize with the stage design?
It really annoys me. It really annoys me. I couldn't watch Portugal properly. I'm like, only two or four works. It's very annoying.
So which was most striking for you?
Where they turned off the lights in Irish performance that year, for instance, so you couldn't see the stage. That worked very well. I'm really sorry.
Uh,
The reason is it's not Florida Meter's fault, or it's like when you remove the screens, you need to go very retro and arrange the lighting for there too. So everything in that stage was made as if there would be a light source on the back, but instead there was nothing. So it was very dark, and it really didn't work because of that for me. And so it worked only when we're in Cyprus, because they really focused on the dancers, and the ones where they literally turned off the lights, like Ireland and that other lady I forgot, that also sang a ballad and turned off the lights.
mhm. I see. So Amy has a very interesting question, or maybe a very uncomfortable question.
Okay,
What do you think about the stage in Düsseldorf 2011?
2010,
11.
11, sorry. um, I mean, it's nice, but it lacks the story for me. Um, so it's just nice.
Okay, so nothing special, nothing.
Nothing special. Let me see what I thought about it in my thesis.
Well, but this would also be kind of typical for Germany, who has problems with national representation. Uh,
Well, because it's a very slippery ground for you guys to be nationalistic.
well, yeah. So I guess this is why we had this giant toaster on the stage in 1983.
19, oh, yeah, but I think it's kind of representing. I don't think I put it as national representation because it's very industrial. And when I think of Germany, I think of factories. So
Okay, so this is also a very interesting interpretation of, of the 1983
what do
stage.
we have? Metal bars. Let's put them on the stage.
And bulbs, bulbs, bulbs. Ah, so in all these years, are there like where we have this situation that some songs when you are young you don't like them, but when you grow older suddenly you discover oh, it's a masterpiece. Do you have the same feeling with some stages that you didn't like when you started your work and then suddenly you started to love them?
um, Not really, because okay, it's a weird question because the more things change, the fancier the stages get. What you get, what when you look back, it's mostly like, huh, it wasn't that impressive, but fine. It's like the opposite most of the time. And because I started watching after 2003, very very passionately, and it really doesn't have that nostalgia feeling for me that much at the moment. But I looked back to all the stages and I was impressed with some of them, but I didn't have the initial memory of not liking them anyway.
Hmm. So, referring to a comment of Christoph, he says there is a big gap between the 2001 stage in the Stadium of Copenhagen and the following contest with the small Tallinn arena. But does the is the venue and the size of the venue really important for the stage?
It is. It is. I think what happened is in 1997, I think they tried to turn it into an arena event. And in 2001, it was 2001, yes, 2000, Sweden actually in 2000 set the ratio for the stages and the event for me because it was the moment where you have this round stage, some screens, and you had the audience. So it is the stage that everything that comes afterwards actually look like. But in 2001, Denmark tried to push it a little bit further and made it a stadium event, and it really didn't work. It wasn't Eurovision-esque as the others, so they had to size it back. So when we are talking about sizes, Russian stage and Russian event is like the biggest, but it's still not a stadium event. It's also about the rules that European Broadcasting Union has. They made it an arena event, and it's going to be an arena event, not a stadium. It needs to be a closed venue, etc., etc. And before the arena was a thing, it was more of a theater event. So that also impacted the staging and the looks of it. And there is also one very interesting example from United Kingdom where uh, they used a studio instead of an arena or a theater or anywhere. And it was also very debated. uh, it was year 1963. I advise it to everyone because there's no connection with orchestra and thing, and it's like music videos. And that's, I think, the small scale, and Denmark is the biggest scale, and they both didn't work.
I see. So, coming back to the questions of our beloved fans here, Michael is asking, what is the worst stage design in Eurovision history for you? And Alex, at the same time, is asking, what stage do you like most in the last 65 years?
Okay, I like Danish stage in 2014 most. I think I can say that because it's very clean. It's still referring to the national heritage. It has a story, and it is very nice. It incorporated very well with the winner that year, Rise Like a Phoenix, shined because of that, the staging, because of the stage. So I think it was really memorable. It was my favorite. Um, the verse stage is very hard to tell. I'm looking at the Madrid 1969, for instance. It's really not impressive because all they have is some flowers around and a Salvador Dali sculpture. So that's really not impressive. Denmark with the stadium we mentioned is also not that impressive. So I they tried things, it didn't work. I do not want to bash any any of them, but the most impressive is 2014 for me.
I see. So, Hans is asking for the blueprints. Did you have the chance to see some of them? And did the final result of the stage change from what was originally planned in some cases?
Maybe in earlier years, but I didn't see blueprints. I saw the renders and the models. Like there are even like models or physical models of some in the news, and they the stages, the end productions are pretty much the same with what they agreed on. It's, I think, not like architecture. There's also a time limit, so they can't really go back and forth with revisions, etc. So I think they just do whatever they agreed on.
I see. So, we were talking about Florian Wieder, we were talking about Mr. De Groot. So it seems to me that there are not so many stage designers capable of doing Eurovision, or is it just that the EBU is always picking the same people?
Well, it seems like back in I have some back vocals. Sorry about it. So it seems like back in time, it used to be more of an internal thing that the TV channels that represented the countries were internally solving. So when it was TRT for Turkey, for instance, they really wanted to internally solve it, even though the EBU was very skeptical about their capabilities. That's why in earlier years we see more of the internal designers actually handling it themselves. And because the production is not as big, it is also easier, I think, for them to handle it themselves. But Roland de Groot did it because basically they did it several times because Netherlands won several times. And the Irish designer that I spoke to, Michael Grogan, also did it because Ireland won several times. It was very local. But the recent years, the world changed in a way that the production, it became more global. Whatever you're consuming here is made somewhere else anyway. So uh, I think as a result of that, also you go to the specialists on every production, and even the Russian stage was not made by a Russian designer; it was made by an Irish designer, and Florian Wieder also became almost the designer of Eurovision stages because he's the expert and he knows every detail of this. So uh, the TV channels are not the broadcasters are not bothering with going on an adventure. I think I really thought because Netherlands have so many good designers. I'm not including myself. I'm just telling about the other designers. They would go for it themselves internally, but they didn't because the, why bother when you have an expert on the field? And I kind of agree with that too. So
Don't you fear this could become boring at some point?
well, Florian Meter is a great guy. I don't want to say anything bad about him, but there is nothing bad about him too. But yes, it might be a bit boring. I think it had. Like, I was fearing that in 2017 when I wrote the thesis. It was my conclusion. I guess it will be very boring because everything became very global, no national representation whatsoever. But I think now the approach is more like he will try to incorporate the national stories too. But uh, still, you feel the lack of diverse design approaches, and that's why, from a designer's perspective, I still feel like if we had some different styles, different attitudes, different people, like again in 2014, it was an architect, not even a designer, then it gives a fresh approach. And that versatility, when you look back to your recent history, is very amazing. And yes, at the moment, it's a bit more bland.
Okay, so Christoph is asking, what song, in your opinion, harmonized best with the stage it was performed on?
Well, I asked the same questions to the designers I talked to, and they gave very political answers. They're like, all of them looked very great on the stage. But for me, I think from the recent performances, I can think of the most of the performances in 2015. Am I wrong? Wait, the one in Sweden, 16. 2016, most of the performances were looked amazing on screen because of the extra technology that we had that year. And I think Jamala's performance worked really well on stage. You can see how the betting odds go from 1 to like 40 to 1 to 2. When that happens over a period of time in the rehearsals, you see that, yes, the staging worked. And I think in Stockholm 2016, Jamala's performance really worked. And also uh, in 2010, Norway, manga really looked great on the stage. It was almost like the stage was made for them. So the manga from Turkey. That's the performance that I can think of right now. But there are a lot of performances every year that I feel like, yes, the staging worked. It's amazing for them. Yes, that's what Eurovision is. So
Okay, so Martin would like to know, would you like to design a near sea stage in the future? And I would add, what should it look like?
oh, that's actually something that I am going to work on. I'm going to make my ideal Eurovision stage, my personal stage. I really would like to. That's one of my hopes from the future. So
Okay.
at the moment, I was just, hoping I could get a small position in Rotterdam. I had a volunteering position and I could meet people and that then we could meet other people, etc. So I was really making my way up there and then coronavirus happened. So
So we keep, of course, our finger crossed for
for
next
next
year.
year. Yes.
Okay, so I think we had lots of interesting questions. Thank you so much, Merve, for explaining all of your master thesis and very, very interesting details on the stages of Eurovision throughout the years.
Thank you so much for inviting me twice now because this is the second day we tried this.
I thank you for
And
having time for the second time.
uh, it was a very nice. So thank you for all the interesting and nice questions.
Thank you so much. So hope to see you next year in Rotterdam in the organizing team.
Hopefully.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you to all the organizers from here if they are listening.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a nice evening.
So, ihr Lieben, wir können jetzt noch, wenn ihr möchtet, ein bisschen über die Bühnen sprechen. Wenn ihr das möchtet, wir haben noch ein bisschen Zeit. Ne? Ich muss jetzt nur Schluss machen, damit nicht Zoom uns gleich aus der Konferenzschaltung schmeißt und dann wieder unser Talk so abrupt beendet wird. Ähm, ich Ja, also es war auf jeden Fall sehr, sehr schön, mit Merve zu sprechen. Ich kenne sie aus Istanbul. Wir haben uns auf einem Eurovisionsvortrag kennengelernt und dann kamen wir ins Gespräch und ich hatte ihr eben von meiner Doktorarbeit erzählt. Und dann sagte sie dann eben, was sie dann eben in ihrer Masterarbeit macht. Und dann habe ich sie nach Tel Aviv eingeladen, wo wir dann unsere Eurovisions-Konferenz gemacht haben. Und sie hat dann mit im Vortrag über ihre Masterarbeit, hat sie dann da auch den ersten Preis gewonnen, weil das einfach so unglaublich spannend ist, was sie da herausgefunden hat und ähm, wie vielschichtig das Ganze ist. Das denkt man ja einfach alles nicht, ne? So, Christoph möchte gerne meine Lieblingsbühne wissen. Und also es ist schwer zu sagen, ob das einfach aus nostalgischen Gründen ist oder eigentlich finde ich die schon also ich finde einfach 79 eine unglaublich tolle Bühne. Fand diese Saturnringe, die sich da gedreht haben, die war relativ schlicht, aber durch diese Drehbewegungen wirkte die bei jedem Auftritt anders. Das fand ich schon schon sehr schön. Das hat mir gut gefallen. Ich habe da sogar im Kunstunterricht ein Bild gemalt mit einem Auftritt. Also jetzt kein konkreter Auftritt, sondern einen, den ich mir erfunden habe und was die einen mit Lego nachbauen, mache ich dann halt im Kunstunterricht. Und die ist mir noch sehr, sehr gut in Erinnerung, die 79er Bühne. Und natürlich ist auch die 84er Bühne mit diesen Elementen, die da hoch und runter geschoben werden, das ist natürlich echt spektakulär. Und ich muss sagen, mir sind diese Bühnen irgendwie, ich finde die schon irgendwie also anders. Also die Auftritte jetzt beim Song Contest, das basiert ja doch alles sehr, sehr stark auf Filmen und LED-Projektionen, die im Hintergrund laufen. Und ich mag das gerne so ein bisschen plastischer. Ich mag auch gerne Auftritte, wo richtige Props da sind. Ich fand den Auftritt von Moldau in Portugal fand ich sensationell gut. Und insofern war die Bühne in Lissabon für mich eigentlich eher ein positives Erlebnis, weil sich die Delegationen da mal richtig anstrengen mussten, was Fantasievolles auf die Bühne zu stellen und nicht einfach nur irgendein Filmchen über eine LED-Wand rauschen zu lassen. Harrys Lieblingsbühne war das Schiff von Malmö. Ja, das war auch interessant, obwohl das ja nun doch sehr spezifisch für Schweden war, passte das auch sehr, sehr gut zu den einzelnen Acts. Ähm, und Martin fand den Wassergraben in Kopenhagen ziemlich grässlich. Der Gitterkubus dagegen war klasse. Ja, also ich bin da zwiegespalten. Andererseits wirkte die Bühne in Kopenhagen natürlich, wenn man in den Saal geguckt hat, einfach sensationell toll, weil der Saal einfach so grottig war. Ähm, und jetzt von den neueren Bühnen, also an Düsseldorf, da habe ich tatsächlich auch überhaupt keine emotionale Bindung. Ich fand die Bühne in Kiew ganz schön. Also jetzt die ähm, 2017. Die hat mir eigentlich ganz gut gefallen. Und Wien mit diesen komischen Röhren, das fand ich auch ganz reizvoll. Das waren Bühnen, die mir so in Erinnerung geblieben sind. An die Bühne in Stockholm kann ich mich gar nicht richtig, also da habe ich auch kein so richtiges Gefühl dafür. Franz, definitiv, die Bühne 84 war sehr innovativ für die damalige Zeit. Ähm, Ja, ich meine, klar, der Song Contest 91, der ist wirklich unverwechselbar. Das, da kann man sich auch wirklich vorstellen, dass da in den Kulissen dann am nächsten Abend da irgendwie eine Game Show gedreht wird oder ein Monumentalfilm oder keine Ahnung. Ähm, stimmt, in Düsseldorf war ja wirklich nur die LED-Wand, die dann nachher so aufgegangen ist, ne? Äh, Die Bühne in Moskau war toll und mir ist noch die Bühne in Oslo in Erinnerung, 96, weil die dreigeteilt war. Und das hat tatsächlich bei einigen Delegationen für Probleme gesorgt, weil die hatten die Gesamtbreite der Bühne angegeben bekommen und die Griechen hatten ihre Choreografie auf die Gesamtbreite der Bühne ausgelegt. Und als sie dann da waren, stellten die dann fest, oh, die ist ja dreigeteilt, weil die haben dann halt immer in jedem Drittel dann aufgebaut, damit es schneller geht. Dann wurde da aufgebaut, links aufgebaut, dann wurde rechts aufgebaut, dann wurde in der Mitte und so, und dann wurde das also immer gewechselt. Und dann waren die hatten das über die ganze Breite geplant und dann mussten die kurzerhand sich eine komplett neue Choreografie ausdenken. Das ist mir noch sehr in Erinnerung. Ähm, Bei Fleur de Lis, der Auftritt und das Bühnenbild ein bisschen kitschig, aber das war sehr, also wenn es kitschig geht, dann ist das ja wohl der Bühnenhintergrund bei My Friend von Jakudek. Das ist ja gruselst. Also obwohl es schon in gewisser Weise auch wieder kultig ist, weil wenn er dann so mit sich selbst im Duett singt und so, ne, das hat schon was. Aber das fand ich, also das war auch das Jahr, wo so viele Sänger mit sich selbst in der Großaufnahme im Hintergrund gesungen haben. Und damit konnte ich also überhaupt nichts anfangen. Das ist für mich irgendwie ein Zeichen dafür, dass dir nichts Richtiges eingefallen ist. Da war ja dann auch bei den Sisters, hat man das dann natürlich auch gewählt ähm, in Tel Aviv, was grundsätzlich vielleicht in der Form funktioniert hätte, wenn es nicht so komplett asynchron gewesen wäre. Da war irgendwie Ton und Bild ging da nicht zusammen und das wirkte dann einfach auch komplett deplatziert. Gut, ihr Lieben, dann haben wir unsere Bühnensendung ordentlich hinter uns gebracht. Sorry nochmal für gestern. Ich arbeite hier mit einem Laptop, der dringend mal ausgetauscht werden müsste, aber es ist im Augenblick mit der ganzen Corona-Geschichte und dem Einbruch der Umsätze nicht machbar, dass ich mir jetzt noch einen neuen Laptop zulege. Deswegen streamen wir so gut es geht mit dem, was ich habe. Und bisher hat es ja auch immer funktioniert. So, dann wünsche ich euch erstmal einen wunderschönen Abend. Wir haben noch kein Thema für morgen. Sagt mir doch bitte, was ihr morgen besprechen mögt. Und dann können wir das dann entsprechend ankündigen und entsprechend darüber reden. Ähm, Franz, skurrilste Bühne war die von 73, das weiße Doppelstock und die Blumen in den Plastikröhren. Ja, einerseits schon, auf der anderen Seite ist es eine typische ähm, Samstagabendshow-Bühne aus den 70ern, finde ich, also zumindest im deutschen Fernsehen. Also da könnte man sich jetzt auch vorstellen, dass da irgendwie Peter Frankenfeld hinten aus diesem Ding kommt und da waren öfter mal die Orchester auch zumindest so gestaffelt übereinander zu sehen. Deswegen ist es einerseits skurril, auf der anderen Seite dann aber auch schon sehr zeitgemäß. Die 2000er möchte Alex besprechen, also insgesamt die 2000er oder den 2000er Song Contest? Ähm, Harry schreibt, was mich mal geärgert hatte, das war die Bretterwand in München. Dagegen wirken die Bühnen bei den Veranstaltungen in München richtig gut und vorteilhaft für die Künstler. Naja, da war ja die haben halt vorher den Glühbirnenkranz, hatten sie halt über der Bühne und jetzt hatten sie die ganzen Glühbirnen dann nach hinten gepackt. Letztlich sind sie sich dann treu geblieben. Das ist ja ein schönes Thema, Hans. Das gefällt mir gut. Das machen wir. Wir machen morgen ähm, die Titel, die 0 Punkte gekriegt haben und den letzten Platz. Das finde ich spannend, weil das schlägt auch die Brücke von den 60ern bis heute. Und da gibt es eine ganze Menge schöne Beiträge, die wir besprechen können. Und die 2000er machen wir dann, würde ich dann sagen, am Moment, morgen ist Donnerstag, dann machen wir am Freitag die 2000er. Okay, Alex? Dann haben wir schon die Themen für die nächsten beiden Tage. Also morgen geht es um die Nuller und ich freue mich schon darauf, mit euch über ganz wunderbare Beiträge zu sprechen und ihr könnt euch sicherlich schon vorstellen, welche ich damit meine. Alles Liebe euch und einen wunderschönen Abend. Bis morgen. Tschüss.